This is Amelia from Amelia Voice, and today I'll tell you a story that will make your heart ache and your soul burn for justice. A story about the day love died and something sharper took its place. I stood in the cafe where the light was all wrong, too pretty for the ugliness about to happen, and watched Noah twist his mouth into the shape of a sorry he didn't mean. He had always been beautiful when he lied, calm, composed, a man who could pour charm like honey and still set you on fire. "I just need space," he said, which I now know means I've already moved on and I need you to vacate the frame. His phone lit up with her name as if the truth wanted its turn, and there it was, Sienna. She was the type of girl every mother warned you about and every magazine worshipped, the kind whose hair fell in expensive waves like the ocean had been trained to serve her alone. "She understands me," he said, looking over my shoulder like the door would do him the favor of opening by itself. I could feel my heart rise, frantic as a bird trapped in a classroom, hitting every window as it learned that not all exits lead outside. I had chosen wedding flowers that matched the blush in my grandmother's locket. I had a dress in a garment bag that smelled like silken plans. I had been building a future with careful hands, and now those hands were empty. He softened his voice then, the way men do when they step on a butterfly and call it an accident. "You deserve better," he murmured, as if he had just invented the line and wasn't pulling it from the bargain bin of cowardice. I left before the tears could win, and outside the sky threatened rain like a dare. I walked home in a storm heavy enough to baptize a corpse. But the water couldn't wash it off. The humiliation, the sudden orphaning of every imagined morning. The way my name sounded in his mouth like a chore he'd postponed too long. That night I lay awake and learned the shape of my ceiling, and grief emptied me so thoroughly I could hear the echo. The next day, my inbox rattled with pity texts and hashtags of encouragement from friends who somehow knew. "He's trash. You're a queen. Better now than after the wedding. Diamonds glint most when they're not yours." The world kept moving, shameless, and my pain was a small country no one visited. But listen closely. Heartbreak is a terrible teacher and a brilliant architect. It made new rooms in me where I could store my rage with the fragile things, and in one of those rooms a plan began to breathe. I am not the girl who steps aside so someone else can take my place. I prefer to build the stage, write the script, and cast the audience. That's the part Noah forgot. He didn't meet me in a bookstore or on a beach. He met me in a boardroom, a place where I learned to keep my hands steady while signing papers that decided the weather in other people's lives. My company had just opened a second office, hiring, expanding, commandeering new markets with a hunger that kept me warm on nights when love didn't. I had been quiet about my title because I thought humility made me lovable. Humility, it turns out, only makes you easier to underestimate. A week after Noah's breakup, Sienna appeared on my feed like an ad I couldn't skip. Her arm hooked through his as she smiled at a rooftop party glossy with money. "My princessa," one comment read. "Dad is so proud." Another, "The richest girl in the room, as always." The algorithm had done its detective work and delivered a dossier and pictures. Vacations that cost more than cars, a penthouse view that made the city look tame, and a father who shook hands with men whose handshakes shake nations. "He's stable," she wrote under a photo of Noah kissing her cheek, "and he makes me feel safe." 2 likes from their friends, one carved-out cavity in my chest, a bruise in the shape of a notification. Safety. The word tasted like rust. I knew safety. I created it for my employees by offering salaries their parents had never dreamed of. I built safety out of contracts and deadlines and an animal instinct to make something bigger than the sum of my losses. I put my phone down and went to my office early the next morning, before the cleaners had finished their rounds, before the coffee machine had warmed into usefulness. Dawn blued the windows and the city rose as if on a pulley. My assistant, Jules, found me already at my desk, blazer on like armor. "Rough night?" she asked quietly, reading my face the way only someone who has watched you overtime can read your soul. "Productive," I said. "Let's move up the interviews for the executive liaison role. I want to see the shortlists by noon." She blinked, hopeful and cautious. "We already have final candidates." Add a few more, I said. There's room. There wasn't. But grief had given me a taste for making space where space refuses to be made. The morning unspooled into interviews. Faces arrived, tried to impress me with resumes that whistled in the breeze, and left with polite smiles. At lunch, I signaled Jules. Do we have anyone with deep supplier networks and a background in luxury construction? She scanned her screen. One name, older, overqualified, might be a cultural fit if we can handle an ego. I smiled without warmth. Schedule him for 3. He arrived early. That already told me who he was. A man in his late 50s, silver hair groomed like a promise, suit so well cut it made the room feel underdressed. He carried himself like someone who had shaken off disasters and kept his cufflinks regardless. He sat and thanked me for the opportunity with a voice that had sold dreams and delivered at least half. Mr. Moretti, I said, and watched a flicker of caution cross his eyes. Not fear, just the instinct that accompanies stepping onto a chessboard. You've built towers, I continued, thumbing through the portfolio he'd sent. Photos of glass that cut the clouds and stone that looked expensive enough to bleed. You pivoted during the last recession. You kept 200 men working while other firms folded. He nodded once, pride corralled. I solve problems, he said. And you're coming to work for me. That wasn't a question. Another flicker. If compensation is appropriate, he replied careful. I named a number that could make a yacht purr. He nodded, but his fingers flexed. A tell. The number impressed him, yes, but it also barely covered whatever financial bleeding he'd hidden under that perfect jacket. Debt, lawsuits, unlucky timing, who cared? The point was that I had him where I wanted him, determined, grateful, loyal. We move quickly here, I said. You'll report directly to me. Discretion is not a request. It's a condition. He inclined his head. Understood. I slid the contract across the table and watched him sign, the ink drying like the first coat of vindication on a wall I planned to cover. We shook hands and his watch flashed, a custom piece with a tiny engraving I caught by accident. For a second, the world tilted. The engraving matched the one in a photo from Sienna's feed, the one with her at a gala, her father's hand on her shoulder captioned, "The man who taught me to reach higher." My stomach went cold. My pulse hot. I checked the name block on the contract again, as if I'd misread reality. Alessandro Moretti, of course. The city is enormous until it isn't. Until fate pulls strings you didn't know were attached to your wrists. Standing there, shaking the hand of the man the internet called the king of luxury shells, I realized the universe had brought me the father of my replacement, not to intimidate me, not to remind me I had lost, but to sit across from me and ask for a job. He was my newest employee, and somewhere between horror and delight, something in me smiled with all its teeth. For 3 weeks, I played the part of the gracious employer, the one who shakes hands, smiles at meetings, and signs off budgets with the serene cruelty of someone who has stopped pretending to feel small. Mr. Moretti, Alessandro, as he insisted after the second week, was excellent at his job, too excellent, actually. He had that old-world sense of pride that made him stay late, that made him bring binders of projections no one asked for, that made him pace the conference room like he was trying to outrun his past. I let him. Every detail of his work I turned into another piece of my puzzle, another step toward the moment when the truth would finally be ready to bloom, black and brilliant. By day I praised him, made him feel indispensable. By night, I researched his daughter, Sienna. The name had become a flavor I could recognize anywhere. Sweet, sickly, lingering. I found out what she liked, what she wore, which charities she pretended to support, which cafes she tagged in her photos when she wanted to look real. Every curated smile, every champagne-glossed lie went into my growing dossier of poetic justice. I wasn't jealous anymore. I was an anthropologist studying a predator who didn't know she'd wandered into another hunter's territory. Meanwhile, Noah paraded around her world like a pet who'd found a richer owner. I saw them at a charity gala once, uninvited, just passing through the hotel lobby as I pretended to take a call. She wore red. He wore the watch I'd given him for his birthday. When she leaned in to whisper something, I saw the tilt of his head, that soft half-smile he used to give me before he said something cruel disguised as concern. "You work too hard, Amelia," he used to say. "It's not feminine to be so in control." I smiled at the memory now. He wasn't wrong. Control isn't feminine, it's divine. A few days later, I scheduled a dinner meeting with Alessandro to discuss a special project. He arrived in his usual quiet storm of cologne and confidence, and I ordered the wine before he could. "How are you finding the company so far?" I asked, swirling my glass like I didn't already know every move he'd made in the last 72 hours. "Efficient," he said. "Demanding, but I like that." "You seem to," I replied, watching him. "Your daughter must be proud of you." His fork paused midair. "You know Sienna?" I tilted my head just slightly, as if tasting the name for the first time. "We've met." The silence that followed was brittle. I didn't elaborate, and he didn't ask, which told me everything about the kind of man he was. One who preferred to build new towers rather than revisit crumbling ones. I shifted the conversation to logistics, budgets, projections, all words that hid daggers if used correctly. By dessert, he was laughing, relaxed, unguarded. I paid the bill. He protested, of course, but I insisted. "You've done good work, Mr. Moretti," I said. "I take care of the people who take care of me." He left smiling, and I left with the taste of victory growing like a heartbeat behind my teeth. The next morning, I emailed my PR director. "We're sponsoring the Moretti Foundation Gala this year," I wrote. "Full partnership package. I'll handle the arrangements personally." It was a strategic move disguised as philanthropy. The gala was Sienna's kingdom, her red carpet, her photo op, her way of proving to the city she was both beauty and heir. And I was about to walk right through its front gate. The night of the event shimmered with the kind of money that makes ordinary people dizzy. Chandeliers dangled like frozen rain, the floor smelled of perfume and potential, and the laughter was the sound of power rehearsing itself. I arrived in black, simple, severe, unforgettable. When I stepped onto the carpet, cameras clicked. Not for me at first, but curiosity travels fast when confidence walks by. "Amelia Voice," one of the reporters called out, recognizing the name from my company's press. "The CEO behind the expansion, right?" I smiled like I hadn't been born for this moment. "That's right." And then she appeared. Sienna Moretti. Every inch of her glowed. Diamonds like stars that had agreed to orbit her alone. Noah on her arm like a trophy that had learned to grin. "You came," she said as if surprised. "Of course," I replied sweetly. "Your father and I work closely now." Her expression flickered, confusion ghosting across her perfect face. "My father?" she repeated, unsure whether she'd misheard or misunderstood. "Yes," I said softly, leaning in so only she could hear. "He's brilliant, loyal. You raised him well." Her breath caught, a tremor disguised as a smile. Noah shifted awkwardly beside her, his charm cracking at the edges as recognition dawned. "Amelia," he said, voice brittle with panic and memory. "What are you doing here?" I smiled at him, slow and deliberate, the way a cat might smile at a bird that doesn't yet know it's cornered. "Just supporting the family," I said. "After all, we're all connected now, aren't we?" Before either could respond, Alessandro himself appeared, his eyes lighting up at the sight of me. "Amelia, you came." He looked at his daughter, then at me, oblivious to the silent war blooming between us. "Sienna, darling, this is my boss." The word boss hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Her lips parted, then closed again, the color draining from her face just enough for satisfaction to taste exquisite. "Boss?" she repeated almost too softly. "Yes," Alessandro said cheerfully. "She runs the company. She's the reason I'm back on my feet." "Wonderful leader." I smiled graciously. "You're too kind, Mr. Moretti." The silence that followed was music, awkward, heavy, beautiful. Cameras flashed, capturing the tableau. The betrayed ex, the gilded replacement, the oblivious father, the man who had traded love for leverage, and now stood watching it crumble in real time. Noah's hand slipped from Sienna's arm, just slightly, but enough. Her gaze turned sharp, furious, like she was trying to read the script and realizing she wasn't the author anymore. I excused myself before the tension could spoil the evening, leaving them with smiles stretched too tight and champagne that suddenly tasted like regret. As I walked away, I caught my reflection in the mirrored hall, composed, powerful, unrecognizable from the woman who'd been left crying in a cafe. Revenge wasn't a scream or a slap. It was a smile with perfect timing. But I wasn't done yet. The gala was only the opening act. The true reckoning was still waiting backstage, patient and hungry, like me. The morning after the gala, the city felt quieter, as if it had witnessed something it wasn't supposed to see. My phone buzzed with messages, some congratulatory, some curious, all irrelevant. What mattered was that the seed had been planted. I imagined Sienna pacing her penthouse, replaying every moment from the night before. Each realization cutting deeper. Her father now working for me. Her fiancé's eyes flickering when he saw me. Her world's gold plating beginning to peel. I didn't need to do anything yet. Guilt and pride were already at war inside her, and I was content to watch the battle unfold. By noon, Noah's name appeared on my phone screen. I let it ring out once, twice, then answered with a voice dipped in silk and ice. "Amelia," he breathed, as if saying my name could rewrite history. "We need to talk." I almost laughed. "We said everything we needed to," I replied. "You said you needed space." I respected that. "How's the air up there in paradise?" He sighed, the sound of a man realizing that maybe he wasn't the hero of his own story after all. "You don't understand," he began, and I cut him off. "No, Noah, you don't understand. You threw away loyalty for luxury. Don't act surprised when the luxury comes with a price tag." I hung up before he could answer, leaving him suspended in silence, the same silence he'd left me in once. Later, Alessandro came into my office, smiling as always, unaware of the storm circling his family name. "Excellent work on the new contracts," he said. "I'm proud to be part of this." I thanked him genuinely. He was good, honest in ways his daughter had never learned to be. I found myself almost pitying him, but pity is a dangerous indulgence. It dulls the blade. That evening, as twilight dripped over the skyline, I received an email from an anonymous address. Only one sentence. "Do you enjoy ruining families?" I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Only the ones that tried to ruin me first." The next day, gossip columns exploded. "Heiress Sienna Moretti cancels engagement," the headlines screamed. Insiders claim rift between father and daughter. I didn't have to plant the story. The world loves a scandal that eats its own. Still, I added fuel quietly, making sure a few whispers found their way to the right ears. How Sienna had pressured her father into risky deals. How Noah's sudden lifestyle upgrades had raised eyebrows among investors. How the Moretti empire might be crumbling behind closed doors. Lies? Not exactly. Just carefully rearranged truths. When you've been betrayed, revenge isn't destruction. It's choreography. I moved my pieces carefully, ensuring each consequence fell like dominoes, inevitable and loud. One evening, Alessandro showed up unannounced at my office, his face pale, his hands shaking. "My daughter's been humiliated," he said, the words brittle with disbelief. "The media won't stop. Noah's gone, her friends won't answer. She blames me." I leaned back, feigning concern, though inside my pulse was steady, precise. "I'm sorry, Alessandro. The press can be cruel." "It's like someone's orchestrating this," he whispered, then looked at me with searching eyes. "You wouldn't know anything about it, would you?" I met his gaze unflinching. "You give me too much credit," I said softly, and that was the truth. He didn't know the half of what I was capable of. He left soon after, broken in ways that made my heart twist. For a fleeting moment, I questioned everything. Was this justice or just another kind of cruelty wearing a prettier face? But then I remembered that cafe, that smile Noah wore as he lied, the way my heart had been turned into an inconvenience. No, I wasn't cruel. I was balanced. A few days later, an invitation arrived on my desk. Moretti Industries reorganization meeting. I smirked at the irony. The same empire that once overlooked me was now seeking investors. And as fate would have it, my company was in the perfect position to assist. I went to the meeting dressed in quiet power. The boardroom was filled with men in suits who talked about losses like they were weather patterns, inevitable, impersonal. Sienna sat at the far end, sunglasses on indoors, pretending not to notice me. I took the empty chair across from her, my smile polite, professional. "Miss Voice," one of the directors greeted. "We're glad you could join us. We've heard impressive things about your leadership." "Thank you," I said, eyes never leaving Sienna's. "I believe in rebuilding from the ashes. It's where the strongest foundations are made." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her hands trembling slightly as she shuffled her papers. The meeting dragged on for hours, filled with talk of mergers and equity and restructuring. But beneath it all was a pulse of tension, a recognition that power had shifted, that the girl they once pitied now held the matchbox. When the vote came, my company secured a controlling partnership in Moretti Industries. The press release would say it was a strategic alliance. But I knew, and Sienna knew, it was ownership. I had taken everything she valued, without ever raising my voice. That night, as I sat in my apartment overlooking the city, the lights blinking like applause, I thought of Noah again. He had called several more times, each message more desperate, each apology more meaningless. I never answered. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and let the quiet wrap around me like a crown. I had done it. I had turned heartbreak into empire, betrayal into blueprint. And yet, beneath the satisfaction, something restless stirred. Revenge had filled the void, but it hadn't healed it. The ghosts of what once was still lingered in corners I couldn't close. But there was one final act left, one final move to make before I could call it peace. Because justice, real justice, isn't about watching others fall. It's about standing over the ruins and deciding whether you'll rebuild or walk away. And I wasn't sure yet which path I'd take. The night before the final act, I couldn't sleep. The city outside my window pulsed like a living thing, its veins made of light, its heartbeat steady with secrets. I sat by the glass, barefoot, the skyline reflecting in my wine like a second world where things had gone differently. Where Noah had chosen me. Where Sienna had stayed a name I didn't know, where love hadn't turned into a weapon. But that world didn't exist anymore. I had built this one instead, with sharper edges and cleaner lines, and tomorrow it would be complete. The Moretti acquisition had shaken the business world. Headlines screamed about Amelia Voice's meteoric rise. Investors called me a genius. And competitors scrambled to understand how a woman they'd dismissed as ornamental had just rewritten an entire market. Yet none of it satisfied me the way I thought it would. Revenge had been delicious, intoxicating, but like all rich meals, it left me hungry again too soon. Still, I couldn't stop. Closure wasn't peace. It was performance, and I still had one scene left. I arranged a private meeting with Sienna under the guise of discussing the transition. She agreed, of course. Pride doesn't let people refuse the woman who now owns their last name. When she arrived, she looked different, smaller somehow, like her edges had been sanded down by too much scandal and too little sleep. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said, her tone brittle enough to cut glass. I gestured for her to sit. "You don't need to pretend," I said softly. "This isn't about congratulations." Her jaw tightened. "Then what is it about? You've already taken everything. My father, my company, my reputation. What else could you possibly want?" I leaned forward, my voice calm, almost gentle. "I want you to understand why." She laughed then, a hollow, bitter sound. "Because I stole your boyfriend?" "No," I said, eyes steady on hers. "Because you thought you could steal my worth. Because you thought love, money, or power could define who deserved to be respected. You didn't just take a man. You helped him destroy a woman who believed she wasn't enough. You fed that lie because it made you feel taller, and I let you. That was my mistake." For the first time, she didn't speak. Her eyes glistened. though she fought the tears like they were weakness. "You're proud of this?" she whispered. "Of ruining us?" I looked past her, out the window where the city stretched in steel and glass. "No," I said after a pause. "I'm not proud. But I'm free, and sometimes freedom requires fire." Silence filled the room like smoke. Finally, she stood, gathering what was left of her composure. "You'll end up alone," she said, the words trembling with both warning and hope. "People like you always do." I smiled faintly. "Then at least I'll have good company, myself." She left without another word, her perfume lingering like a ghost of a war just lost. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The ache in my chest was heavy but clean, the kind that comes after surgery, not sickness. I thought of Alessandro, too. I had transferred him to an advisory position, generous salary, full respect. He deserved that much. I couldn't undo the pain, but I could at least spare the man who had never meant to harm me. Later that night, as I stood in my office alone, the city humming below like a confession, my phone buzzed again. Noah. One last time. I almost ignored it, but something in me wanted to hear the final note. "Amelia?" he said when I answered, his voice small, tired, almost human. "I don't know who you've become." "Neither do I admitted. "But she's stronger than the woman you left." He was quiet for a long time before saying, "I made a mistake." "You made many," I replied softly. "But I should thank you. You built me, brick by broken brick." He started to say something else, but I ended the call. No goodbye, no forgiveness. Some stories don't need them. I turned off my phone and opened the window, letting the cold air sweep through the room. The wind smelled like rain, like endings, like beginnings pretending to be endings. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I didn't feel powerful or pitied or vengeful. I just felt alive. Down below, the streets shimmered with headlights and promise. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained, about how sometimes justice isn't about balance at all, but about finally choosing yourself after everyone else has chosen against you. Tomorrow I would start something new, something that wasn't born from pain but from clarity. Maybe a foundation for women like me, maybe a new branch of my company that turned survival into art. I didn't know yet. But I knew this. Revenge had ended, and rebirth had begun. I took one last sip of wine, watching the rain smear the skyline into a watercolor of second chances. My reflection stared back at me. Older, colder, wiser, but not broken. "This is Amelia," I whispered to the empty room, the same words I had spoken at the start. Only now they meant something different. And this is not a story about heartbreak. It's a story about resurrection.